The White House held what they described as a listening session today, where survivors of last week's Florida shooting gathered with the parents of children killed in previous shootings to discuss what the country ought to be doing going forward. Here's some of what was said.
We must create a culture of connectedness. We must create a culture in which our classmates become our friends. Every single one of these school shootings have been from young men who are disconnected.
One school shooting, and we should have fixed it. And I'm pissed, because my daughter I'm not going to see again.
I want to feel safe at school. You know, senior year and junior year, they were big years for me when I turned my academics around, started connecting with teachers, and I started actually enjoying school. And now, I don't know how I'm ever going to step foot on that place again.
A teacher would have a concealed gun on them. They'd go for special training, and they would be there, and you would no longer have a gun-free zone. Gun-free zone to a maniac, because they're all cowards. A gun-free zone is let's go in and let's attack, because bullets aren't coming back at us.
You feel for those kids and their families. It seems likely as a political matter that some form of gun control may be coming. The White House has signaled support for stricter background checks and a federal ban on bump stocks. But that's not even close to what many on the left are demanding. You saw some of those demands today at widely televised gun control rallies in Florida. Some of those in attendance were kids from Stoneham Douglas High School in Parkland, and that should not be surprising. It's understandable. People become political activists all the time in response to tragedies. That's their right. Nobody ought to attack them for it. We're certainly not attacking them. We never would. We assume they have the best motives. Most of us have the best motives. Almost everybody's against school shootings. The question is, what do you do about them? Now, if you watch a lot of cable news, you know that the answer is simple. You simply stop taking money from the NRA and you do something about guns. Not anything specific, just something. But first, you have to defeat the evil conservatives who love school massacres. Once you do that, the violence will go away like magic. That's what the demagogues on the other channels are telling you. They use the traumatized children of Parkland as a human shield. Ask them what they're calling for. Ask them to describe these policies that will supposedly fix everything. And these childless news anchors screech that you're attacking the children. It's funny, every January, thousands of other children come to Washington for the March on Life. Like the kids from Parkland, they're against killing. Some of them have had abortions. A few of them have survived abortions. Do the media hold these kids up as the last word on the subject? Do they attack anyone who questions them? Please. A lot of news outlets don't even bother to cover that march at all. All kids at any march, just like all Americans, have a right to talk and to do so in public, to give their opinions anywhere, including on television. Unlike many on the left, we support that right unequivocally in every case. But the rest of us also have a right to add our voices to the conversation. We have an obligation to do that because we all have a stake in this country's laws. And the truth is, this is a remarkably complicated subject. That's why we haven't fixed it yet. Any answer has to balance our need for safety with the respect for the civil rights of individuals and an acknowledgement that this is a constitutional republic. It's not the set of Morning Joe. For example, pretty much everybody agrees that people with mental illness should not have firearms. That sounds simple, okay. But what do you do then with the more than 400,000 Iraq and Afghanistan vets who have received a diagnosis of PTSD? That's a mental disorder. Should they lose their rights to gun ownership because they were injured by war? All of a sudden, it's not so simple. Or how about domestic abusers? Nobody thinks they should have guns. We don't, obviously. But what if they haven't been convicted of anything yet? Can you strip rights from somebody who is legally innocent? And if you can take their gun rights away, how about their voting rights or their free speech rights? We're not sure of the answers to those, but we're positive they are real questions that need to be debated and considered by smart people sincerely trying to make the country better. The media screechers are not helping. They're telling us it's a simple fix as long as you care enough. That's a lie, and they're using children to tell that lie. Spare us. We're for the children. We're not for you. Congressman Jim Himes is a Democrat who represents Connecticut, and he joins us tonight. And Congressman, unlike a lot of people, you've been specific about what you want, and I admire that. You were on CNN on Monday, and you said, and I'm quoting now, we want to be no different from Canada or Australia or Great Britain. So in Australia, and you hear this a lot from the left, 650,000 guns were confiscated from citizens, and that's what you're calling for. Who would do that? Who would take those guns in this country.
No, that's not what I'm calling for, Tucker. Australia is a pretty good example because after the massacre of 35 of its citizens in Port Arthur in 1996, they implemented a whole series. And I don't usually agree with you, Tucker, but you're right. This is a complicated problem that won't get solved, certainly not by the media on either side, but it will get solved over time, not perfectly, by lots of measures, some of which were tried by Australia. Now, Australia doesn't have a Second Amendment, so they're not the best example, but we do know that if we could get universal background check, no matter where you buy a gun, you get a background check. We do know that if you could find a way, and I admit that it is complicated with rights to make sure that people with temporary restraining orders temporarily give up their weapons. If you could do a whole bunch of those things, there is no question that, like Australia, we could see our gun violence in this country plummet.
Well, there is a question about that. I mean, we don't actually know, and we had the assault weapons ban of 1994, and it seemed like it would reduce killings, and it didn't. We know that conclusively. So you're never quite sure what the effect is, but you twice pointed to Australia as a model for gun policy here. So what specifically about Australia? Again, a country that confiscated its citizens' guns by the hundreds of thousands. What specifically did they do that we should do?
Yeah, you can keep using the word confiscation.
Well, they did. That's a fact.
That is not
no, that's
what
a
I
fact.
was calling for. It is also a fact that they instituted a mandatory waiting period for the purchase of a gun. It is also a fact that they instituted a universal background check. Two things that we don't have in this country that might be considered constitutional. So you can leave the confiscation behind because that's not what anybody is talking about.
But that was the essence. That was the essence of what they did. You're not allowed to own a gun in Australia except under circumstances where the government says you've somehow got a right to. Same with Great Britain. You pointed to Great Britain. In Great Britain, you're not allowed to own a gun. You have to prove that you should be allowed to have one. Are you calling for that?
Well, no, I'm not. In both of those countries, in the absence of a Second Amendment, you're right. You have to show a cause, a reason to have a gun. We have a Second Amendment in this country, which you may be surprised to hear I support. So we're obviously not going to require the citizens. Well, you can say that as much as you want, Tucker, but it's not
I'm just
true.
saying it once in response to what you said.
What I'm calling for is what, by the way, the president, I'm not usually in the habit of praising the president, what the president has said he's willing to consider. Things like tightening up the background check, things like restrictions on technology like bump stocks. Nobody's calling for confiscation or for everying they do in Australia and Great Britain.
But look, you're the one. Just to be clear, don't paint. Well, hold on. Don't paint me as a demagogue. You just said this 2 days ago on CNN, and you pointed specifically to a country that got rid of gun violence because it got rid of guns. So I think it's a fair question for me to ask when you point to Australia, why are you not calling for confiscation? Because that's the core thing they did.
First of all, Australia did not get rid of guns. There are still a lot of guns in Australia. There are plenty of guns in Canada. There are plenty of guns in the United Kingdom. These are countries that are different than our own. But no, they did not get rid of guns in any one of those countries. So you can keep talking about Australia. I never called for confiscation.
You're the one who was talking about Australia, not me. Okay, so let me just say this: those countries also have universal gun registration.
Australia is a good model in one way. Australia is a good model in one way, which was that after a tragedy, 35 people dead in Port Arthur, they got together, the Prime Minister and 6 states got together and said, let's pass a package of gun safety changes that will reduce violence. Now, not all of those changes would apply in the United States. I'm not calling for that.
Like taking them away by force from the population. So let me ask you this. Those countries also
have
you
can keep saying that, but that's not what anybody is calling for.
I'm sorry. I know a lot about this, and that was the whole point of the bill. So, and you must know that too.
That was a part of the bill that I'm not calling for, and frankly, almost nobody is calling for confiscation.
Okay, so let me ask you this: those countries all have universal gun registration? You own a gun, you have to register it with the government. Are you for that?
They actually canceled the universal gun registration in Australia because they felt that it was more of a burden on legal gun owners than it was on people who were going to use guns illegally. No, I'm not necessarily for it in the United States. I am for everybody having a background check. I am for people with temporary restraining orders temporarily giving up their guns. I am for a limit on the size of the magazine that you can use. Things that we've done here in the state of Connecticut, which have been constitutional and have not resulted in people's Second Amendment rights being violated in Connecticut.
I was wondering this today. So you work up on Capitol Hill surrounded by armed guards. Do you think they have too many guns, and do you believe that their magazines hold too many rounds? And if not, why not?
Tucker, nice try. You're not going to get me to say
No, it's a sincere question. They protect you. You feel safe with a lot of people with high-capacity magazines, but I'm not allowed to have them in my house to protect my family. Because why? Explain it slowly so I can understand.
Okay, all right, let's explain that. That's an absurd argument, but let me agree with you that I would be perfectly happy with the general public having the same firearms that the Capitol Police have if the general public were, like Capitol Police, required to undergo a criminal check, required to recertify themselves every single year for the use of those firearms, and personally accountable and professionally accountable for how they're used. So if you're willing to put all of those restrictions on the general public's right to own firearms, which is what the Capitol Police have, which is what Marines
no right
have,
otherwise. Let me just ask you finally one last question. So,
nice
so
try,
you just, because some of us are confused by the details here, you endorsed the most recent iteration of the assault weapons ban. And in that, and I've asked this question of a lot of lawmakers, I'll be interested to see your response. In that, it would ban rifles that have something called a barrel shroud. Those would be illegal. Yeah. What is a barrel shroud, and why would you ban it?
So a barrel shroud, as you probably know, because you've talked to your other guests about it, is a covering on the barrel of a gun that allows you to hold that gun when the barrel has overheated because of multiple rounds being fired.
That's correct.
Now,
that's right.
Right. Okay. So we agree on that. Now, I'm not all that worked up over barrel shrouds, and I'm not even interested really in going the route of saying that an assault weapon ban will solve our problems. I happen to support a ban on technology that allows you to squeeze off 20 or 30 rounds in a minute or two. Now, I understand that the definition of an assault weapon is tough.
But then why did you support the bill that would have banned that and pistol grips and folding stocks and bayonet lugs and all these things that are irrelevant? It makes you seem not serious if you support something like that.
You know, lots of states have passed assault weapons ban. I heard you talking about, you know, the desire of the populace earlier. Lots of states have implemented, including my own of Connecticut, assault weapon ban. Now, what I'm going to tell you is that the number of people who die in this country as a result of assault weapons, though they make the headlines, that is a relatively small percentage.
I'm aware of that.
Nonetheless, I don't want people to have guns that allow them, and most police officers don't want people to have guns that allow them to squeeze off 20 or 30 rounds very rapidly without reloading. Look, you asked about barrel shrouds. I'm not sure that barrel shrouds are the key here.
I think I'll let you unpack it all, and I appreciate your willingness to come on and explain your views on this. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.